Hello. Um, I just wanted to talk about something which uh, it really strikes me as having been quite characteristic of recent times, and that thing is divisiveness, a kind of fed and pushed divisiveness in the media and of course in social media as well, which is very amenable to that sort of thing. And now one of the places that you could really see that, and you sort of really swing into place powerfully, was around the result of the Brexit referendum in the UK. Now, the Brexit referendum, which was simply something which, for good or bad, and whether you should trust it or not, I don't believe in trusting governments very much at all. Was something which put to people, do you want this or do you not? Yeah. Do you want to stay in the EU or do you want to go? It asked them to give their opinion. It asked them to give an opinion, basically, because that's all a referendum is. Yeah. And and then on top of that was added, the announcement that whatever the result, then whatever the result, it would be acted upon, and all this sort of stuff. So, what was basically started off as an advisory referendum was politically turned into a kind of a sort of executive referendum in a sense, yeah. Um, and my experience of that was basically people thought about it, and I mean, if they decided to actually vote, then because they'd been asked to vote, been asked to give their opinion, they probably talked to their loved ones, their neighbors, their friends. That's what I saw actually happening. People just talking to each other and having different opinions, and then the day came, and they sort of like put their X on the paper. But the next morning, we lived in a different world. The next morning, the media mobilized to essentially pretty much portray half the population as racists, xenophobes, all kinds of things. Yeah. And of basically being personally responsible for, for whatever was going to come. Yeah. I mean, this was such a complete misrepresentation of everything. And what happened since then, and what's happened since then, it's continually being pushed as as this sort of a scenario, basically. Yeah. So suddenly, the people who happen to have a particular opinion, which wasn't the opinion that they were instructed to have by the government and by a large part of the media and the media class, suddenly were to be punished, essentially. And and that's what we had. Yeah. And to this day, people, certain people, will not let go of it. And it is not in any way the majority of people who happen to vote one way or another. This is the actual creation of the media class by and large. It's the creation of the media class and a certain section of, I think, largely very middle class people, yeah, who have decided that the country is divided and that there is basically a battle, and a battle was fought, and everyone who fought that battle is now responsible if they didn't agree with me. And this is just a fantasy. There was no battle. They asked people to give their opinion. They did what they were told. That's all that happened. And yet, it has to be turned into an enormous battle in which now some people apparently have to pay. Well, why do you think the people have to pay? People did what they were asked to do, which is to give their opinion. Just because they have a different opinion to you doesn't mean that they now pay. And the fact is, none of those people were personally responsible for anything that happens. You think the majority of people who put an X on a piece of paper have power? Is that what you think? Wow. But it underlies a tendency which has continued over the intervening years. I'm hoping it will now start to sort of like subside, but it's this tendency to drive division, to drive divisiveness, to drive polarization, and it's almost like it's a drive to discharge some sort of like energy in some way, and it's not healthy, it's not realistic, it doesn't relate to real life, and I think it's very important that people resist this kind of thing, you know. I think it's very important that people resist this kind of thing and that people keep hold of reality. Yeah? Keep hold of real life, real people, real relationships. That's what actually happens. And that's what happens in every case. Yeah? But for some reason, it gets overridden by media, politicians, whatever, what have you. Don't take part in it. No one's your enemy. Just don't take part in the divisiveness. It seems to be very, very tempting for some people. They want a certain kind of emotional gratification. They want an enemy who will be made to pay. And if it's a whole mass of people, it seems that apparently that's even better for them. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it's like it's something in people. It's more primitive than the sort of thing of like wanting a particular politician or public figure to pay. It's more primitive than that, but it tries to dress itself up in very, very high-minded clothing. But the fact is, this is just not real. And I think people really need to kind of like think about that and disinvest in this kind of mental participation and performance, which always has a kind of emotional undertow to it anyway. Stop looking for people to blame. Stop looking for people to, so who do you think need to pay, you know? Human beings are all the same, really. And the amount of division there is, you know what? It's not even worth thinking about. So that's what I say about all of that. It's a strange thing, you know, divisiveness. Divisiveness is, I think, one of the big things we have to kind of like try and circumvent, try and detach from, try and unplug, you know, because it's played a big part in this sort of media circus, which is absolutely part of power and part of our system of governance, I'm afraid. And so you need to unplug from it and maintain your independence, maintain your humanity, and maintain your reality.